Nico's decision to transfer away from Tennessee is a disaster, not just for the Volunteers, but for all of college football, especially a team like the Utah Utes. I'm going to tell you why on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. It's your first time listening to the show. Make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Brice Larson, the host of Brice and Bianucci at 7 to 10 a.m. on 103.9 to 98.3 FM, the Utah ESPN Radio Network. Brice, always great having you on. We're going to talk about some Utah spring ball, some thoughts and things we want to learn about the team. Last opportunity we get to talk to and see this Utah team till summer. We'll also talk about some of the major men's basketball hires that Utah's made. But we have to start with the news that just really took the college football world by storm. And honestly, I thought Saturday was genuinely a dark day for college athletics when Nico Iamaleava announced, the Tennessee quarterback, that he was going to transfer away from Tennessee. He was making $2 million. Reports already wanted $4 million, and the Volunteers were like, nope, not going to pay it. So he moved on. Is it good that the school took a stand? Yes. But I think it's just really bad that you have a quarterback who's willing to step away from that, from a situation as stable as that, winning, had success in the first year, for those financial reasons. Because to me, it's just a reminder of how hard it's going to be for Utah to keep some of these guys in place. Because when you look at how much some of these other schools and programs are going to be able to offer, even if Utah has players that are really successful, what happened with Cameron Calhoun and Keanu Tanavasa leaving for what sounded like it was better offers and just other situations, that's not a good thing for Utah.
I think this could go either way for college football as a whole, because you have a SEC program who's normally a top 25 SEC program that has been knifed by this decision from Nico to decide to move on. Who is the who are the power brokers in college football right now? It's the SEC, it's the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
If this gets their attention and makes them move a little bit faster. I know we have the House versus NCAA settlement coming up around the corner. We should have some clarity on that rather soon. But if this is the thing that makes them move a little bit faster on putting some guardrails on name, image, and likeness, maybe getting contracts in place. We've talked about maybe the possibility of collective bargaining. There's a lot of issues when it comes to that as well with these players. But if this is the thing that kind of gets that sped up a little bit, it could be a good thing for college football. Is that going to happen? I'm not so sure, but you're correct. This is not a good look for the University of Tennessee. This is not a good look for Nico and his representatives. And this does spell issues, at least until we get some clarification on that court case, the House versus the NCAA, for other programs similar to Utah that might not be ready to go in that arms race for college quarterbacks that are asking for $4 million.
Yeah, that's the problem. And you met like Colorado is a team that's supposedly in the running for Nico. Oh, Big 12 team, that's a win. Texas Tech brought in a big portal class. Oh, it's a win for the Big 12. It's really not, though, because it's a win for those programs. Only certain programs are going to be able to do that. BYU landed the number one player in the country. Oh, does that prove a Big 12 team can land it? No, it proves a Big 12 team with that level of resources can land it. And we know that's what BYU has. We've seen Tech add a top 3 portal class. Like, if you're not offering that money, like in the past, it was like, oh, if you can land a guy at this school, like, okay, you can get a guy in this conference. No. Now the financial aspects is we're playing on a totally different playing field now. And that definitely concerns me for Utah, because unless something changes, they cannot offer based on, they just haven't been able to pay the level of the amount of money and the level of players that these other schools in the Big 12 even are able to.
Right. And that does seem like it's an issue for a lot of Big 12 schools. I mean, you saw Kansas this last year. I don't know how much it played into, the issues that Kansas basketball had on the floor, but they obviously have donors, they have money, but it didn't quite pan out for them. But I'm shocked that this happened to an SEC school, that SEC school couldn't quite pay what the kid was asking him. That's pretty surprising. And you look at these teams across the country, and yeah, there's a couple, as you mentioned, Texas Tech, Colorado, that have some money behind them that could maybe be in the mix there. But I don't know. You're right. There is a little bit of a discrepancy across college football, and this is going to be a problem when players decide to move on and go and get that money.
It's a massive problem. And for the likes of Utah, once again, like I look at a guy like Devin Dampier. If Devin Dampier has the type of season I think he's capable of, a CBS writer just named him to a top 10 quarterback coming into the scene. Like that's how good he thinks Dampier is. If Dampier is that, and maybe he's good enough where he goes off to the NFL, like that possibility. I'd see him more as a college guy for all of his years of eligibility, which he has 2 more left. I have a very hard time seeing Utah keeping him. If Nico is indeed a top 5 to 10 quarterback, like I don't like saying that, but look at what's going on across the sport. Georgia couldn't keep Carson Beck. Like, think about that for a second. That's crazy. Tennessee couldn't keep Nico. Like, how is Utah going to be able to retain a Dampier? They have some NIL stuff, right? Spencer Fano stuck around. And Spencer Fano is an incredibly loyal individual, it seems like, but I don't think Utah was giving him nothing to stay. They must be paying him something, obviously, but I really am concerned about the future of college sports, and especially a school like Utah, when how it's going to be harder than ever to beat the top teams when they're operating on a completely different financial playing field. So therefore, their roster is just at a higher level.
Yeah, I think the Carson Beck situation was a little bit different. I don't think that he had a great conversation, or not a great conversation, a great relationship with the coaching staff there in Georgia. I think it kind of soured late there. And then, of course, he has his girlfriend that goes to Miami, too. I think that played a big part.
I don't think that didn't that not like, not to drive too much into the gossip. aren't they not together anymore? Like, I know this is what everyone's tuning in for, is their Carson Beck, whatever Cavalier it was, but I think so. Anyways, keep going.
I didn't know that. Maybe I'll have to go do some research and double check on that. But as far as I know, that was a big reason why he decided to head down to Miami and take that money too. It was all about money, $3.5 million, I think, that he got there. So yeah, that's all. It all plays a part into it.
It does. It all plays a part, and it's just a very interesting situation. You are going to have the guys that are loyal and will take, hometown discounts. Like, that happens. I feel like if Alabama or some of these programs like a Georgia and Oregon or someone, like, they could double what Spencer Fano probably got at Utah. Like, that just seems likely based on the difference in the NIL playing field, based on the talent that these teams are landing. But it did feel like Fano was like, no, I'm staying at Utah. I'm a Utah guy. We never even heard rumors or anything about him going anywhere, which were incredibly encouraging. I think there was a little bit of nervousness just in terms of, you have this elite player. Is anything going to happen? But thankfully it didn't too. But I mean, Brice, just once again, like, to make this a bigger conversation, like the other reminder again, like, you can win, you can have this much success, you can prove you can do it at this school. And at the end of the day, you have guys still deciding, nah, I want a little more money. And I shouldn't say it, like, Nico got double what reportedly double what he is, but that's just a bummer for college athletics as a whole, for what we love about college sports.
And good on Tennessee for just, sticking to what they were saying and say, all right, if you don't want to be here, if you're not going to show up for the first day of spring practices, then we'll move on from you. Yep. Like, we've got other options. There's other 4-stars, 5-star kids sitting behind you that we can move on with. And when you look back, Nico didn't make the greatest plays late in the season against Alabama, against Ohio State in that playoff game. But overall, I mean, a team like Tennessee that just says, nah, we're going to move on. And Heupel says, you know what, go and find a new spot to live, to play, because that's not what we want in our culture of a locker room. We don't want that type of leader. We need a guy who's going to be here no matter what. And we're moving on. I think that says a lot about University of Tennessee and the program that they're running right now.
I agree, and I would hope Utah does the same thing if something like this comes up there. And I'm sure in some instances they already probably have. It just has been kept behind closed doors. It's just crazy how public the Nico thing ended up getting. But speaking of Utah football, Utah spring ball, final week of practices ahead of the spring game. Want to talk about what we want to see from this Utah team in the last week of practices and what we hope to learn going into the spring game. We're going to just touch on that in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Game Time has you covered, because with Game Time, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Unfortunately, Utah Jazz won't be in it, but there are still some incredible playoff atmospheres that you guys could go after and look at. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off, and their last minute deals can save up to 60%. Here's why I use Game Time. The priority, the last minute deals save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, and theater events too. They also have that all-in pricing, which means no surprise fees at checkout. With what you see is what you pay in the app. Game Time is such a big ticketing app. When you're talking about Game Time, you are talking about a place that provides the best and most reliable coverage that you can find. So make sure you guys head over to Game Time to get the best coverage for your tickets. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps no space, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all caps no spaces, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price is guaranteed with Game Time. All right, Brice, talking about Utah spring ball, we've learned a lot about this team. Zacharias Williams, wide receiver 1. Kyle Whittingham feels great about the offensive line. So what are things that we still need to kind of figure out and see this? Well, number one, for the spring game, I just can't wait to watch Devin, Dampier, all these pieces in person getting after it. I think the biggest thing I still want to know and see is what does this team's starting defensive line look like? Is it, I feel pretty strong it's going to be Logan Fano, Aliki Vaimahi, and Dallas Vakalaki, but then who's that other defensive end? Who are the guys right behind too? And D tackle, who else is going to step up? There are a lot of things that still need to fall in place at such a huge spot for Utah. This team has been so good in the trenches. Get everyone back on the offensive line, great. Defensive line, you lose a lot of your best players. So how does that shake out? That's probably the biggest thing I'm looking at. Is yours the same, or what else could it be?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. One thing that you look back at last year in college football and really stood out to me in the playoffs specifically was the difference along the defensive lines for the team. So you look at what Texas was able to do throughout the college football playoff. It all started with the defensive line and the penetration that they were able to get against Arizona State, and then they move on and win a bunch of games and obviously put themselves in a spot to really win a national championship. And the way that it worked it all started with that defensive line. So I think that's a great question to have about this Utah team. They lose a lot from last year with Tanuvasa taken off and the starters that they had, all the experience that they lost. They're going to have to replace that. And I think that it starts and ends with the defensive line on the defensive side of the football. Of course, I want to see what that offense looks like. Brand new. You mentioned Devin, Dampier being able to do that. I want to see what the run game looks like a little bit more too, and then just kind of how it all works out. I'm curious to see how much they show in the spring game coming up this next week. I have suspicions that we're not going to see a ton. It's going to be very vanilla, but we'll still be able to see some sort of resemblance of action, and I think that's what we've all been waiting for since last year.
Yeah, at the end of the day, one of the things, and the starters apparently aren't going to play a ton, or if they do, we'll see. And that was something even a couple of years ago, Cam Rising would go a series in the spring game. That was something that was part of this too. But for things I'm also very excited to see is who are the other receivers. So I saw a cool practice clip I would encourage everyone, when you get the chance, to look up Utah Athletic socials and find the pass that Devin Dampier threw up to Otto Tia, and he mossed the defender for, I think it was Scooby Davis too. So a starting Utah defensive back, who's Davis, a really good player. So it was a great play by Tia. I still think Tia is the next guy. And then Creed Whitmore's been making plays. The Mississippi State transfer, Ryan Davis, has that connection with Devin Dampier. I feel like it's going to be him, but then you get Justin Stevenson out there. A Wyoming transfer who's got a ton of potential too. Darren Zipper, how does he factor into things, Brice? This Utah team does not have a Dorian Singer. Like last year, it was Dorian Singer, wide receiver 1, is a guy with 1,000 career receiving yards at Arizona. Didn't work out at USC, but come on, you knew okay, that's wide receiver 1. And Williams is apparently that guy, but there's just this is, once again, they lack the top guy. A lot of quality pieces in this room that have me excited about the future of the Utah wide receiver room.
Yeah, you bring up Adrian Zipper. He's a guy who had a good game late in the season last year, and I'm actually curious to see what he could do. And I'm curious to see what he brings to the table because he had an older brother. He played at Florida, played really well. He was a tight end. He's out of Florida, Lakeland, Florida. Originally, was a kid that came in and showed a lot of promise, but just hasn't quite gotten onto the field a ton throughout his career so far at Utah. And I'm curious to see if he can step up and be that guy, if he can finally stand in and be a dude that can catch a lot of balls and have a good season this next year.
That would be incredibly exciting. And seeing the quarter, like, are they going to do anything with Nate Johnson? We've heard a lot about Nate Johnson being used in all these different ways. Is he going to come in at all? Is it just going to be Isaac Wilson, Bird Ficklin? How does that work out? Is it for sure Blake Cotton opposite Elijah Davis and Smith Snowden in the slot? How does the safety rotation, linebacker room was encouraging on the pass that Dampier threw up to Tia. I was really excited to see Leibani Demooney out there running around. Former Stanford linebacker, was with this Utah team 2 years ago, then season-ending injury last year. You hated it, but he gets the year back, so comes on now. And this Utah team, after losing Correne Reed, will definitely need his veteran leadership. That was a sneaky big loss for Utah last year because Reed got hurt, and you didn't have Demooney, who the year before Reed Barton would get. I think it was more Reed got hurt 2 years ago, and then Demooney stepped in. There was really a seamless transition, so they don't have that either too. But like you said, seeing more Jason Beck's offense. Going back to the quarterbacks, Brice, I'm really curious to see if the plan is, hey, if Devin Dampier gets hurt, or just needs a backup, whoever comes in, is it really Isaac Wilson? Like that would be so surprising to me. Or if not him, we're going to roll out another true freshman quarterback. Nate Johnson to me is the guy that I know they were using him in a different way, but with his talent, his skill set, and that's still a guy who won games for Utah at that spot against some decent teams too, like Baylor on the road. Like they still won with against UCLA, and I know that wasn't a great performance by him, but I still feel like he's the guy. So the Utah quarterback room is another one that just fascinates me.
Yeah, that's always a curious spot. For everything that I've heard coming out of spring practices so far, is that a lot of the reps besides Devin Dampier is going to Isaac Wilson, correct?
Yeah, and Ficklen, those have been the two guys.
Yeah, so you're right. That is pretty curious of a situation. I think that they like the way he looks in this offense. That's another thing that I would love to see in the spring game, as you mentioned, how Isaac Wilson looks against, not totally live, because obviously they're not taking him to the ground, but just a little bit more simulated situations and how much he has improved and what he looks like in this new system. And is it the system? Is it the offensive line? Does he make better choices? Does he get the ball out quicker? I want to see a lot of those things too. And it sounds like from everything that we've heard, all the reports, he's been a lot better, more improved, and feels more confident in this new offense.
Yeah, and he was a guy who played well in the spring game last year. Wilson is a guy I'm still a believer in. I am just going to have to see it with him in a live game because he won the job, I believe, last year because of how he did in practice. But he just struggled so much with pressure and just on timing and everything because he got flustered. I think he got flustered just because of that pressure. So he's a guy that I am not going to be like, yes, I have confidence in him as Utah's backup quarterback right now until I see him go in a game and do it. If he wins the job, I'll feel a little better about it. But it's also like a guy like Brandon Zerbuck. He came over from Oklahoma. I haven't heard anything about him. What's going on there? So Wyatt Becker was another high recruit I thought would have a chance to be a backup early, but Ficklen's been the better one, at least so far. So a lot of interesting things to learn this week for Utah, and really excited to see what it all looks like once we get to the spring game too. Speaking of things I'm excited to see what they look like, the Utah men's basketball coaching staff is starting to take shape. They've made some big additions in the transfer portal for basketball, but now talking about what this group is going to look like come time for basketball season. That's what we're going to be discussing is the coaching staff in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. They have surprising insights. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save even more. It's also that all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So also that easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, just all caps no spaces, at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all caps no spaces, for half off your first year with Monarch Money today. Brice, the Utah men's basketball program has been busy in the transfer portal, but they have also made some really strong additions to their coaching staff. First one is assistant coach Martin Schiller is a guy who comes over. This is a guy who was the G League coach of the Salt Lake Stars from 2017 to 2020. Then spent a couple years overseas and was even overseas before that as well too. He was born in Australia, but has coached overseas when assistant with Germany for a couple years, even the Artland Dragons as well, which is a team over in Germany too. So a lot of that overseas experience. Most recently was over in Lithuania, and actually, now was over in another German team too. But just like a lot of overseas experience, but a veteran coach to add to this staff. I think this is a strong addition, especially with there's so many guys overseas that get overlooked because they're just not in America, and you have more scouting eyes here in America. I think it's smart for Utah to make this play and get someone who has those international ties.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen guys who have come into American basketball, especially more now. Look at the guys that are in the NBA. Victor Wembanyama. You go through all. Yegor Demon is about to be a draft lottery pick from BYU. You've got guys that are from overseas, and I've actually been curious because we've seen teams like St. Mary's and Gonzaga go deep into that well of international players who come in and play incredibly well. I'm shocked that more teams in college basketball haven't followed that type of format or that system and bringing international guys over who have experience at like the semi-professional level that can really come in and step in and play. It's important to have a coach that has those connections in those semi-professional leagues that can bring these kids over and sign them up and have them ready to go, because there are so many international kids that just get overlooked, as you mentioned, and don't really get the time of day from a lot of these coaching staff. So this is an important move for Utah basketball in that right. We'll see if it pays off on the recruiting trail or if there's some other things that he could bring to the table too.
And speaking of guys who will bring some things to the table, Utah has also hired the director of operations and player personnel, Enrico Sylvester. So now you got a guy in Sylvester as well, too, just kind of rounding out everything too. He spent last year with Sacramento Kings in the basketball operations office, and is a guy who, hey, if you're gonna come over as that working relationship with Wes Wilcox too. He joined Louisiana Tech's men's basketball staff as a graduate assistant from 21 to 22 before following Urch Cannell to Tulsa for 2 seasons. So has that time, hey, as a GA and then that NBA experience as well too. We're obviously impressed Wes Wilcox enough. I think it's good that you have the director of player personnel who also has a strong relationship with the GM. So, hey, how are we going to shape this roster? How is this all going to work out? I think it's another nice addition that Utah made.
Yeah, it's so important to have guys that understand how teams are built. And as we go, I mentioned earlier in the episode, the House versus the NCAA case that we're going to get some more clarification on throughout the summer here. When that revenue sharing comes, how is the money going to be spent? And what's the best way to spend that money? That's so important to have guys that know how that's going to happen. And so that's a very important move that Utah has made there.
It is an important move, in this Utah basketball program trending in the right direction. We're going to be talking more about the additions they've been able to make in the transfer portal coming up here really soon as well, because encouraging gets. You got a guy from Akron, West Virginia player as well, I believe. So this has been a really good week for Utah basketball. It feels like they're doing some really strong and nice things. What'd you say, Brice?
Fairleigh Dickinson too, right?
Fairleigh Dickinson. Yep, they got the guard who averaged 20 a game there as well. So these are nice additions, and it feels like players that Utah just wasn't getting last year. Like last year it was Miro Little, who, and I like Miro Little. It didn't work at Utah, but like he was a project to Baylor. He didn't really do anything. Now Utah's adding guys who did things, and I'm more encouraged by that because you added a guy like Miro Little who, it didn't work at Baylor, but he's got a chance to be really good. Well, who ended up being better? The guy they got from ECU, Ezra Asar, who had produced a lot too. And of course, Utah also got Keanu Dawes back. So lots of encouraging things going on with Utah basketball right now. Brice, always appreciate making the time to hop on. Please let everyone know where they can find you at and check out more of your work.
Every single weekday morning, 7 to 10 a.m. on 103.9 and 98.3 FM. You can also find us on the Brice and Bianucci podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Brice, really appreciate you coming on.
Anytime, my friend.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking the latest that comes out from Utah spring football as we gear up for the spring game on Saturday. Keep it at Locked On Utes for your team, for coverage of your favorite team every day.